Okay, well, time now for our political panel, and joining us today, Labor MP and member for Higgins, Michelle Anandaraja is back, and fellow Melburnian Liberal MP, member for Menzies, Keith Wallahan is here too. Welcome both Keith and Michelle. Keith, I might start with you. You are kind of the man of the moment, aren't you, after Aston? The link between rates, indebtedness and politics has been pretty well established, even potent in the past. That was somehow broken in our analysis from the Aston by-election. Reports emerged today, Keith, that you are in a group that are discussing pretty fundamental policy shifts for the Liberal Party that might include negative gearing, capital gains tax, in light of the RBA's recent decisions and its decision again today. Can you confirm that you are open to entertaining some big policy questions for the coalition?
Thank you for having me. I'm the co-chair of the Metropolitan Members Group. It's a new group that I formed with James Stephen. We both share one thing in common. We're quite lonely as federal Liberals in a major city, James being Adelaide and me Melbourne. We've had a few meetings and we've heard from demographers and other people who are experts in different fields. One of the many things that has jumped out at us is the lowering home ownership rates, particularly for millennials and younger people. That's of concern to us. Of course, there's a political cost to that. There's two levers you can pull on home ownership. There's, of course, supply, and that's primarily state-driven, but there's some things that the federal government can do. But there is also the mix of renters and people who own homes. And I think we should look at all potential levers. I'm not going to announce policy on the run here, but I think everything should be on the table, not only for electoral reasons, but I think for a better society where more people can own things.
No, understood. And Michelle Anandaraja, I don't necessarily want you to run commentary on Liberal Party processes there, but if Liberal MPs were bold enough to examine things that had kind of been considered off limits before, would you be open to Labor just joining some of those discussions?
Hi, Greg. I find it incredible that the Liberal Party have had some sort of epiphany and decided that now, after 9 years where they could have actually resolved the housing affordability crisis, they've decided to actually put some work into policy. I welcome it, frankly, but here's the thing. We have got a housing affordability crisis. We have an entire generation who are locked out of the housing market, and we have women, children, veterans and First Peoples who have fallen through the cracks. And tonight in Australia, 122,000 Australians will be without a home, of which 12% will be children 12 years or less. So this hasn't happened overnight. It's happened due to sustained policy failure under those opposite over the last 10 years. What we are doing is trying to get the Housing Australia Future Fund, a $10 billion allocation devoted to building 30,000 affordable and social homes through the upper house. And I would urge the Liberal Party, rather than having some sort of epiphany from the sidelines, to actually get into the arena and support this bill. Well, put your money where your mouth is.
Well, there's a question for you then, Keith, posed by Michelle. If you're up for almost anything on the table, why not rethink, in light of Aston, of the Housing Australia Future Fund?
My party and I will always support a good bill. That is not a good bill. Despite the rhetoric surrounding all the speeches for that bill, it will not deliver the housing that's needed in this country. And in fact, it will have an inflationary effect. The answer has to be supply, but it also has to be the mix of renters and owners within that supply. And there's nothing in this bill that achieves that. We need to look at actually delivering houses for people in the cities, but across this country. And this isn't a bill to do it.
All right. Why don't we move on to The Voice, because, you know, this is a live question. In many ways, a monumental day perhaps emerging tomorrow, where we may get a greater understanding of the chances of bipartisanship on The Voice. Michelle, from the government's point of view, is there room for compromise here if the Liberal Party room comes out and says we don't rule out support for The Voice, but we do make it conditional on, let's say, the extraction of Clause 2 from the chapter? Why not meet the coalition somewhere around that?
Greg, the voice is not about politicians. The voice is above partisan politics. It has come from the people, the first peoples of this country. And the ask is modest. It is simply about two things, about recognition and consultation. I would say to the Liberal Party that, I have watched with equal parts of anger and now sadness, and I'm seeing them sabotage this referendum through relentless negativity and, honestly, nitpicking. That's what this is. It's nitpicking. The issue here is that they need to appeal to their better angels. I know that they reside there, but I can't see them. All I am seeing is mean-spirited behaviour from the Liberal Party that was penalised by the Australian people in May of last year in the Victorian election and in Aston. So a referendum is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to right some wrongs in this country and to recognise in the birth certificate of our nation our first people's rightful place there. And I would say to the Australian people, I understand that you have doubts and questions, and they will be answered over the next few months. But in the solitude of that polling booth, it'll be you and your conscience. And I would say put aside those doubts and vote yes. It is the right thing to do.
All right. Keith, what position, I know you've come at this, with your legal hat on in recent weeks and months, but as you enter those discussions tomorrow, what is the base right that you want protected as a Liberal MP in that room? Is it a free vote?
I think I'll approach the party room tomorrow with the national interest in mind. And we are one of the oldest democracies on earth. And one of the reasons we're one of the oldest and most successful democracies is because of our constitution. And so we alter it with care and we'll ask serious questions. So when questions have been put by Peter Dutton and questions have been put by other people, that's not seeking to undermine the purpose behind the referendum. It's seeking to make sure we understand what it is we're asking Australians to do. And in order to have a proper and free vote, we need to be fully informed. And this is a very serious thing. So I'm the Deputy Chair of the Joint Select Committee. We will be asking those questions in the coming weeks. And I hope the government has an open mind about properly assessing constitutional risk, because that is something we should not build into this. And it's not a modest proposal. That's why Julian proposed Section 2 be removed. That is quite a radical proposal that many people didn't accept, and including those who are well-known yes campaigners like Professor Craven.
Yeah, I will go back to Michelle in a moment for a final word on this, Keith. But just on the process, for those of us who wonder, where does tomorrow's meeting fit in to the very committee process of which you are a senior member? How do these two fit together tomorrow? Does the Liberal Party room make a decision before you've even sunk your teeth into that project?
It's a good question, and I don't want to preempt what will happen in the party room tomorrow. It's a very important process. But the Labor Party has established its position, but I hope they have an open mind to revisit that. If my party comes to a position tomorrow, it will be the same approach, that you may revisit or rework any particular proposal that comes out of tomorrow, but I don't want to preempt that.
All right. And Michelle, you sound, eminently confident that the Australian people will end up supporting this, and yet plenty of people who've supported the voice in principle over years, academics, Frank Brennan among them, really think that success is being imperilled by the inability to land some bipartisan consensus. Do you accept any of that criticism, that maybe you've got to give a little bit to get this across the line?
Again, this is not being... We are simply, as a government, the conduit for our First Peoples' voices. This is what they put to the Australian people in the Uluru Statement of the Heart in 2017. But in fact, the gun was fired by John Howard in 1999. This process has been going on for 24 years. And if you go even further back, it was Menzies who agreed to the 1967 referendum that was finally completed and delivered by my predecessor, Harold Holt, the former member for Higgins and a Liberal Prime Minister. I would say to the Liberal Party, return to your roots and understand your history. There is a long history in this country of bipartisan support for constitutional recognition of our First Nations people. And here we have an opportunity to actually deliver that. So this is not about Labor, it's not about Liberal, it's about Australia. And it's about reconciling our past with our present in order to go stronger together into the future.
Yeah, and I think your remarks, both of you, do remind us that tomorrow's discussions are very important, can't be easily dismissed wherever the Liberal Party lands it, because it's an important moment. Thanks to both, Keith Wallahan, Michelle Anandaraja. We'll get both of you back before too long. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.